So the first tech card that we're going to talk about is the Acidic Swamp Ooze. This is like the bottom of the barrel weapon destruction card. Every new player should have one. He doesn't cost anything. I'm pretty sure he's just part of the basic set that you get for just playing the game, as he doesn't have a rarity. So this guy is a 2 mana 3/2 battle cry, destroy your opponent's weapon. So for stat wise, a 2 mana 3/2 is never a bad thing. Even if he's not destroying a weapon, he's still a decent body on the board for the mana cost and the stats that he has. But the ability to destroy the opponent's weapon is exceedingly useful when decks like Pirate Warrior in the picture, you know, Paladin because a true silver champion, Arturian that drops the Assbringer. It's also good against rogues, shamans, hunters. There's a plethora of classes that the Acidic Swamp Ooze can come in handy. Even mages now, because they run Medivh so very often, you can actually hold the Acidic Swamp Ooze against them and get yourself some good Medivh value. But on the other hand, you know, cards like Hungry Crab that have like a very niche situation, you know, he cost a 1 mana 1/2. Even if you don't get the value from him, the body on board almost isn't even worth it. Like, you have to basically get that value out of the Hungry Crab to make it useful. Meanwhile, a card like this, not so bad. You still get a 2 mana 3/2, which is pretty cool from the Acidic Swamp Ooze. So the Acidic Swamp Ooze's big brother is the Gluttonous Ooze, the 3 mana 3/3 battle cry, destroy your opponent's weapon. Again, the whole weapon destruction thing that applies the same as the Acidic Swamp Ooze we just went over, but this guy actually gains armor equal to the weapon you've destroyed's attack, which is very, very useful. So if you happen to unpack this guy from a pack, or you got him through the end of the month rewards, definitely, in my opinion, I feel more comfortable running this guy in my deck than the Acidic Swamp Ooze. But let's say you can't afford the epic, you know, you're a free-to-play player. The Acidic Swamp Ooze is just fine if you're finding yourself going against a lot of classes with weapons and you feel the need to destroy them. I mean, Acidic Swamp Ooze or Gluttonous Ooze versus a Pirate Warrior, if you happen to draw those, is just fantastic. I mean, weapons in a Pirate Warrior deck is like where 50% of their damage comes from. Granted that, you know, they first of all draw their weapons and then they continuously upgrade them, which is very, very common in the Pirate Warrior. So heading into another weapon destruction guy, I would have to say the grandfather of the Gluttonous Ooze is the Harrison Jones. So this guy, you may not throw him in as many decks due to the fact that he does cost 5 mana, and he's a tidbit more than both the Acidic and the Gluttonous Ooze, but on the bright side, he does have the 5/4 in stats, which is quite nice. Again, decent body on board. You're not paying all of this mana for a card that's ability that's only good if it triggers. It's not good anytime else. So still dropping a Harrison Jones for 5 mana on turn 5, that's a 5/4 in body. He can put in some chip damage. He can trade with another minion. There's some use there. You know, you don't always have to get Harrison value. But again, instead of gaining armor, you still destroy your opponent's weapon, but you actually get to draw cards equal to its durability. So cards like Harrison Jones are normally found in like Taunt Warrior, Paladin, a little bit slower decks because his mana cost is a little bit higher and you can kind of survive the early game a little bit better than decks like, you know, Mage, Rogue, Hunter, where the early game is very, very important to those classes, and being able to either establish board presence or clear the board is much more important than drawing cards. And that's why this guy fits a little bit more into those slower control decks, or maybe a slower mid-range deck where drawing is a little bit more important later on, plus the bigger body helps it a little bit more. So moving on over to our next tech card, sorry my thing got minimized here, is going to be a card that we really don't see that often, but I figured it needed to be brought up because it still can be really useful and people aren't playing around this guy anymore. When Reno decks were a really big thing, you know, you could throw in one mind control tech and it was totally okay because you needed to run a 1 of deck, which means 1 of 30 cards, and you know, sometimes you need to fill that 3 mana spot or you needed some board control, and mind control tech fit in pretty well. Now to the fact that Reno decks aren't a thing because he rotated to wild, mind control tech, no one plays around this guy. He's still a 3 mana 3/3, same stats as the Gluttonous Ooze, which tells you, you know, not the best stats in the world, but still he's a body on board. The mana cost isn't too much for that. Plus on the fact that if your opponent has 4 more minions, you get to take control of 1. So, you know, he's very good against Token Druid, very good against Token Shaman. He's decent against some rogue decks that like to swarm the board. Zoo, even though Zoo's not a big thing, you know, in the lower ranks, Zoo could still be maybe prevalent due to the fact that it's a very cheap deck to build, but overall the good thing about mind control tech, and why I just figured that he needs to be brought up, is he once was popular. He's not popular right now, but maybe he'll gain popularity later. I mean, cards like tech cards see a huge influx of play, then because everybody's playing them, the decks change. You know, the the tech card becomes less relevant because less people are playing the deck it counters, and then, you know, people start playing the deck that it used to counter back because no one's playing that particular tech card again. So it kind of looks like a wave in respect to like the tech cards being played and cycled out. So just keep that in mind. MC tech still pretty good in Mage, and still pretty good in Warlock in my opinion. More control based decks, that is, not like an aggro Mage or an aggro Warlock. The next one is going to be the Hungry Crab. I touched on this guy a little bit earlier in regards to his stats. So let's say you throw your Hungry Crab into your Miracle Rogue list or your Quest Rogue list or whatever the case may be. Having a 1 mana 1/2 is pretty bad. I mean, on turn 1, it's not a horrible play, but there's just much better cards that you could put in your deck than a Hungry Crab. But let's say your opponent does happen to run Murlocs and you can destroy a Murloc and gain +2/+2. That's huge. He turns into a Tunnel Trog, or a Totem Golem for 1 mana, and you've destroyed their minion. It's this, like, when he goes off, it's big, but if he doesn't go off, it hurts you more than it helps you. And that's the problem with, I think, Hungry Crab. There's another crab that we're going to talk about, or let's say a crawler, is going to be the Golakka crawler. We'll cover him next. And I think that's a little bit better in regards to a tech card because the Hungry Crab is so swingy. You know, you put him in his deck, he goes off, you know, you've won the early game. There's no recovering after someone Hungry Crabs you. Meanwhile, a card like the crawler, which we'll cover here right now. Sorry, guys. The Golakka Crawler, he's a 2 mana 2/3, so you spend a little bit more mana, but you're getting a 2/3 in stats. So even if you're not destroying a pirate, which is what this guy does, he's still a decent, again, body on board, and you're not heavily relying on the fact that his ability needs to go off. He's decent as is, and if you happen to destroy the pirate, you're just that much ahead, that much more ahead. So I think the Hungry Crab should follow the Golakka Crawler rule, where it should cost, you know, 2 or 3 mana and get a lesser bonus in stats and actually just be good on its own. So you actually can see Hungry Crab, I think, even more often, where it doesn't feel as bad when the ability doesn't have to go off. But either of the case, it's a really good tech card as of now because Paladin is very prominent. I didn't mean to like talk bad about the Hungry Crab. It's a very popular tech right now, probably one of the most popular out of all these besides our last one, which is by far, in my opinion, the best one out of all of them. But, you know, didn't mean to talk bad. Hungry Crab still really good. I just wish it followed it not being so bad if our opponent just happens to not be running Murlocs. But, you know, with half the meta, or not, or half the matchups we seem to be getting are against Paladin, or like a token Druid running the Murloc package, the Hungry Crab's good. The Golakka Crawler is good against, of course, Pirate Warrior. It's good against Rogue because most of the Rogues run South Sea Deckhand or Swashbuckler. A lot of the token Druids run the Bloodsail Corsair, which destroys a weapon durability and it summons their patches from their deck. So whatever deck running patches or 1 mana pirates, Golakka Crawler eats them. Plus he's good on his own. Definitely not a bad tech at all. Moving to a card that you guys are probably going to be kind of weirded out by that I picked it is the Black Knight. So you'd be like, Rob, I haven't seen this card. What are you doing? Why is it on the list? We actually ran a warrior deck, a control warrior, and we put this guy in here just testing it out. You know, that you never really get to experiment with a lot of things if you keep copy pasting everybody else's list. You kind of have to go out and explore. You can be like, okay, no one plays this card. Why don't they play it? You test it. If it's shit, then you're like, oh, that's why no one plays them. But I was actually very, very surprised. I played the Black Knight for, I want to say, 20 to 30 games. And this guy, I want to say 80% of the time plus came in clutch. He's a 6 mana 4/5. So again, the stats aren't great, but he's okay. You know, he's not as bad as a Hungry Crab, but he's definitely not as good as being like be able to play like a 6 mana 5/5 or 6 mana 5/6 or 6 mana 6/5. But his ability is what really gives him the edge, and that's destroy an enemy minion with taunt. You could be like, well, Rob, you know, how prevalent are taunts? Well, let's take a look here. Paladins have Spike Ridge Steed. They've got Tyrion. They got Sunkeeper Tarim. They have, what is he called? They have Stonehill Defenders, Primordial Drake, the Curator. The deck is filled with taunts. All right, what about Warrior? Taunt Warrior. The entire deck is a target. You're like, okay, well, what about aggro decks, Rob? Well, you look at Druid. A lot of token Druids are running Targ Creeper now. Druid of the Claw is an option. It's not as prevalent in, you know, token Druid, him being good, but he still can find targets in even a token Druid deck. Shaman decks, of course, Stonehill Defender as well. Some run the Primordial Drake. A lot of them run, or not, I shouldn't say a lot of them run, but stuff they get from the Stonehill Defender, like Alikira, can be used on. There's just so many decks and so many things that you didn't think, like even Rogue, what is it called? The Biolfin Tidehunter summons that 1/1 slime, and if they've completed their quest, that slime is a 5/5 slime with taunt. Black Knight kills that no problem. So it's just in every matchup, you're going to be able to find some minion to play taunt, or some minion that they have that you're going to wait to Black Knight. And especially when you're running a slow control deck, you're looking for those extra value turns towards the late game. The Black Knight provides. So if you don't have him, I don't recommend crafting him right away. But if you happen to have the Black Knight, he's really not as bad as you think he is, and you could tech him in if you're having trouble against, you know, some of those, you know, Jade Druid, Taunt Warrior, and Paladins. He's really, really good against those particular classes. And our last one is going to be the Eater of Secrets. Mage and Paladin, really, really popular right now. Common thing amongst them both, they both run secrets. Mage probably a little bit more than Paladin, and because the Mage has, you know, ice blocks, they've got cards that draw them secrets. Meanwhile, the Paladin only has 2 cards in the deck that generate 2 secrets. So the Mage is going to have a lot more secrets on the board more often. But what makes the Eater of Secrets really good is against the new Control Mage, the Tempo Secret Mage, and of course the Freeze Mage, is that they have 2 ice blocks in their deck, and they depend on them so much that they know even if like they have, or you have lethal on the board, they have an additional 1 to 2 turns to kind of burn you out because they have that extra life with the ice blocks. But when you run Eater of Secrets, it completely shuts down their late game to the point where you just win. Like you fill up the board, they know that they can't clear it, so they let it hit their face. After it hits their face, they're like, well, I have 2 turns of ice block, so I have 2 turns to burn my opponent out. You drop Eater of Secrets and just swing, that's oh shit, there's no counterplay to that. On top of that, if you happen to run the if you happen to run against the aggressive mage, you know, counterspell and Mere Entity are really, really annoying to deal with early on because they already have a brilliant early game and they have their burn late game. So being able to get on the board and get the tempo back and get rid of those secrets while buffing your minion is just so valuable. Granted that this guy is really, really bad if your opponent doesn't run secrets. You know, a 4-mana 2/4 is pretty not so swell. But I think because of how popular mages and paladins are right now, that you can, I mean, I've teched this guy into every single one of my control decks where I found room to put him in. I mean, he's in my warrior list, he's in my mage list, he's in my druid list. So it's just, he's in my miracle rogue list. He just comes in clutch way too often than not, and really good card to put in there. And keep in mind, after we tech in Eater of Secrets, guys, you're gonna never play a mage again. That's just the way tech cards work. But the main point is people are gonna tech Eater of Secrets in. Mage is gonna become less popular because, you know, they keep getting Eater of Secrets, and that's really fucking annoying to lose to. They change to something else, then Eater of Secrets doesn't see much play because there's not as many mages. Less Eater of Secrets, then the mages come back, and then the Eater of Secrets come back. Like I mentioned, it's kind of a wave in regards to the tech cards. So just make sure you know when you throw in one of these in your deck, whether it's any of the cards I've discussed, make sure you're seeing those decks that the tech cards work against, because if you're teching in a tech card and you're not going against the decks that they work with or work against, it's not really going to help you too much. So just pay attention to the meta. What are you playing? What do you need? Put that in your deck, then you succeed. So with that, thanks for watching, and if I happen to miss out on anything or you'd like to add anything to the comment section below, I'd be more than happy to read those, and I'm sure anybody looking for additional information in regards to tech cards or anything I've missed out is going to look to the comment section, because I know you guys do a fantastic job down there. So as always, I'm Rob, or Warshak, and happy whatever the hell day it is.